time, I will go ahead and turn the webinar over to you.
Thank you, Liz, and welcome everyone to PCLaw reporting. We have a big topic in a short period of time, but hopefully I'll be able to get through some new information for you, or a review of some of the things you may already know, and make PCLaw reporting more valuable to you. I am proud to say that I am located in Houston, Texas, and I'm a proud member of 3545 Consulting Group. We are a series of consultants, independent consultants, and we feature the LexisNexis products. We're very happy to be a part of this Feature Friday, as well as all of us to be able to represent the products. And PCLaw is certainly on our preferred products list. So now for an introduction to PCLaw reports. One of the first questions I receive is, why don't my PCLaw reports match? So if you have that question in your mind, I'm going to try to answer it for you. It's generally speaking just the way our interpretation is of what the reports are really telling us. They're usually giving us the exact right answer for the question we're asking, but not necessarily are we asking the right question with that particular report. So let's see if we can understand some things about those reports and what we're asking of them, so that we understand why they wouldn't necessarily match up, because we're asking two different questions for two different reports. We're going to take a look at what I think the top 5 reports in PCLaw are that you should use on a monthly basis in order to make sure everything is working and flowing through correctly for you. And then we're going to take a look at modifying the PCLaw reports. There's so much that you can do as far as changing those built-in reports, the layout, the fonts, the presentation. It's really worth that exercise to be able to see if you can modify it to make it work for you.
Nancy?
And then fourth, we're going to... Yes?
Sorry to interrupt. Could you speak up a little bit? People are having some trouble hearing you.
Oh, they're having trouble hearing me? Is that better, Liz?
It's louder for me, so I'm hoping it's better for them. They also said that you sound like you're a little bit far away from the phone, so I don't know if it's a speaker issue or what.
Okay, well, is that closer now? Are we better now?
That sounds better.
Going to be, the last thing we're going to do is look at the financial reports, and we're going to see what we can do actually within the financial reporting area of PCLaw. So that's a hefty schedule for today, so let's get started as quickly as we can. The number one reason that our PCLaw reports don't match is because we are trying to match different things. It's most important to understand the difference between the entry date, the invoice date, and the collection date on our entries. So let's just start first with the entry date. The entry date would be the date that we put in our time entry. So that very first date, or the entry date, could be a date of March 1st. But that March 1st time entry might appear on an invoice dated in April. So the entry date would be in one month, and the invoice date would be in another month. And then we could potentially have a third date involved, and that would be the collection date. And the collection date might not even occur until June. So we have an entry that was worked in the month of March. It was billed in the month of April, and it was collected in the month of June. It's even potentially possible that those dates could straddle a year. That we could have a time entry that was entered in November that was actually billed in January and was collected in June. So whenever we're asking a question of a report, it's very important to know which is our focus date. Are we asking PCLaw to return information to us based on the date worked or the month that it was worked in? Are we looking at the month that it was billed, or are we looking at the month that it was collected? Another reason that sometimes our PCLaw reports don't match is because of our hold time. We have this great new feature in PCLaw that allows us to change the status of a particular entry. We can put it on hold, or we can actually no charge it or never bill it in that hold area. Some reports allow us to include hold time. Some reports exclude hold time. And our register is going to always show us the total, whether it's hold time or not. So we have to make sure that the status on a particular entry is taken into account when we're looking at those reports. One of my favorite reports, and a great way to illustrate this, is the Lawyer WIP Billing and Collection Summary. And what that report is telling us is it gives us really a focus of what happened in a particular month. So if we're looking at the focus date of June 1st through June 30th of 2012, then the questions that it's answering is, what happened in the month of June? So in the month of June, how many matters were open? In the month of June, how many entries were entered, billable, dated in the month of June? And then it shows us billings. What were our billings in the month of June, and what were our collections in the month of June? So if the time was actually worked in the month of June, that time is not necessarily included on a bill that was dated in June and probably not collected in the month of June. So there's a timing difference, and this report is focusing on what happened in the month of June. And to illustrate the point about the hold time, notice that in our billable time worked for this period, we're seeing 162.70 hours. Down in our listing or our register, we actually see that it was 163.7 hours. Well, our natural conclusion would be the report is wrong, or my time listing is wrong. In reality, they're both correct. This one on the Lawyer WIP Billing and Collection Summary is excluding the hold time, whereas this particular report is showing the hold time. And that excluded entry is just above the screen. But if we only focus on that, we might think we're getting the wrong answer. And we're really not. So how did we actually generate that report for the Lawyer WIP Billing and Collection Summary? When we generated it, we went into the productivity area. We looked at the Lawyer WIP Billing and Collection Summary. We can select an individual timekeeper, and we're selecting the date gate. In this particular instance, the date gate applies to each one of those separate columns. And then we generate the report, and we're going to get our answer. So we can see in the month of December what happened for all those different areas, but they don't necessarily correlate. We could tie them out because we could tie the billings totals to our invoice report, our invoice listing, because our invoice listing would also have a date that matched. And we could tie out our collections to our payment listings. We could do it a number of different ways, or our fees collected summary, but we would be using the collected date of the same period. The fees collected summary gives you a month-to-date and a year-to-date analysis. So that is definitely focused totally on the date of collection. And if you go through your productivity fees collected summary, then you're going to put in your starting and your ending date. It will allow you to put in an actual date, or it'll allow you to select the month. Either way, it's going to assume that it's going to be a complete month. So it will be from the beginning of the month to the ending of the month. And then that fees collected summary will give us that profile of what actually happened during a given month, or from the beginning of the year to a given month, so a open starting date until an ending date. it's going to show us the collections that occurred during this month and also last year to date as well as this year to date. A great report, bearing in mind, of course, that that's based on the collection date. Okay, so now that we have a little bit of an understanding about the date gates and how they work and what questions are we asking, let's look at the top 5 reports and understand what we might want to do on a monthly basis to make sure that everything that was entered was actually billed, and then find out what happened to it when it was billed. Well, the first one may surprise you a bit. That's the calendar report. If you haven't explored this one, you really have to. Even if you say you don't use the calendar in PCLaw because you're keeping that in another system, in your practice management system, in Time Matters perhaps, that's perfectly fine. I still think that you definitely want to include the calendar. The calendar is available from an icon on your toolbar as well as from a very convenient location on the timesheet. For an individual timekeeper putting in their time, the best thing in the world is to be able to check it in a calendar view. So we're looking at going into data entry, into the timesheet, and then you'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner, as long as you have your calendar activated, that you're able to see your time entries, or the time entries really for many when you have secure access to, on a calendar view. I can immediately see whether or not I've hit my goal, and I can tell whether I have any missing days. My personal opinion is most lawyers way underbill their time. It's too easy to skip a day. It's too easy to forget about all those things that were done during a given day. So being able to see it in that calendar view is great. And from the person who's actually responsible for billing, no better way to check and double check to say, did everyone get their time in? You can do it for a selection of multiple people, or you can look at it from one person at a time. Quick, easy way to say, is all of our time in? You could definitely do a time listing as well if you want to, but the calendar gives it to you in an easy check format. Well, then the next thing I would recommend doing is to run a work in progress report before billing. You might want to run one both before billing and after billing. The reason is we want to see that everything is in there and what is the potential amount that we're going to be able to bill. The work in progress report is one of those reports that gives us the ability to actually include or exclude our billable and non-billable time. So those hold entries, the entries that we wanted to put on hold, if we choose to never bill them, we can exclude them if we wanted to from our WIP, and we could also exclude our non-billable entries, those that have a task code of non-billable work. However, if we wanted to include them, we could include them as well. My favorite way of looking at it pre-billing would be to print the matter balances only, because I want to just take a quick look and say, what are our potential billings? That way we're going to understand what happened to our inventory after we actually generate the bill. So the work in progress, when it's totaled by matter, gives it to us with appropriate aging. Very important, because in some cases we know that we're not going to bill except on a quarterly basis, or perhaps it's a contingent matter, or it's a fixed fee budget that we're not going to bill until the close of the matter. And that's a very logical choice. But others that are billed on a monthly basis or an hourly basis, we want to make sure that we don't have any straggling entries, any entries that were put in outside of our date date. And this gives us a quick and easy way to check that. It gives it to us sorted by individual client as well as the individual matter. And from a responsible lawyer's perspective, that's a great way to say, what's the overall client investment that this client's going to make if we have a series of matters that we're going to be dealing with or billing. Well, then we're going to actually go ahead and generate those bills. We're going to edit those bills, correct those bills, and we're going to come up with a final value. Now, if we have chosen to flat fee, fixed fee, write up or write down during that billing process, we have a good benchmark of that original work in progress report, And now we want to compare it to what we actually did bill. So what came out on the invoices? Again, the date we're looking at here is going to be the invoice date. So the invoices that were generated with a date that follows in that period. And it answers the question, how much did we bill this month? The invoice journal will also show us if we've had any write-offs. Of course, if we have any tax that we're including, but if we've had any write-offs. That's another area that sometimes confuses people at PCLaw. We need to understand the difference between a write-off and maybe perhaps an adjustment. An adjustment is done pre-billing or during the billing process, and a write-off is done post-billing. So an accounts receivable bill write-off, where we would do a bill write-off or write-down, is what we're going to see in that write-off column. Well, we are able to see the total of what was billed on a matter-by-matter basis. We can see the invoice number and, of course, the most important invoice date, as well as a series of different summaries at the bottom where we can see the totals by fee credit lawyer versus perhaps responsible lawyer. In PCLaw, wherever we see the word fee credit, provided that we are allocating our invoices, the default method, which is to the fee credit, this is actually the amount of money that was generated by the person who worked those hours. So Barbara Angela actually worked the $55 worth of time, and Robert S. Brown worked the $12,600. So it is based on the working attorney unless we've set our system settings differently and we're doing our allocations differently. The next report would be the accounts receivable listing. Accounts receivable is the lifeblood of any law firm. We always have to keep our eye closely on that accounts receivable, and most importantly, we have to know what the aging is doing. PCLaw has the ability to do an aging accounts receivable. So it is capable of doing an aging report, and I can do a look-back aging report. So in other words, if my CPA wants me to produce an accounts receivable report today that was actually effective as of 12/31/2012, I can do that because I can put in my ending date, and it's actually able to go back and calculate up to that ending date period. You'll notice, though, on that first screen, when we go into accounts receivable, from reports, accounts receivable, and receivables by client, that I see on the common page the first date, which is where our cutoff date is. And then you'll notice that I have over on the other tab, in that third tab area, I have an age from date. So I can decide how I want to see my aging. I can actually decide the aging categories and determine which one, how I want to present that information. Sometimes we want to focus in very closely between the 30 and the 45-day mark. If we're looking at what actually moved into that 45-day mark, then we know, okay, well, it hasn't completely gone into that 60-day column. So we can look at the in-betweens by changing our aging categories. We can also focus, most importantly, on what is the total client investment. So I may want to see not just what my receivables are that have aged significantly, but I want to see what the aged receivables are that are over a certain dollar value, because obviously that's going to affect my cash flow immediately. And notice that I have these great summary areas that I can summarize by the collecting lawyer, the lawyer who's responsible for the matter. I can do it by the matter applied to introducing a lawyer. I could do it even by department or by department by lawyer. What a great way, especially in a larger firm, to be able to have one particular responsible lawyer focus on the collections that are aged to a certain amount or over a certain dollar value in that period. That receivables report can show a lot of detail, or it can be summarized. So you can summarize it by individual matter, or you can show the detail of the invoice. Again, a great way to focus in specifically on a matter with the detailed information at your fingertips or grouped together by the individual client. Then I think once we've gone through the billing process, we've looked at our accounts receivable to see what's aging now and what our total client investment is, the next place that we might want to look is in that productivity area. And you'll notice I'm right back on that lawyer with billing and collection summary. Because once you understand how it works from a date gate period, you really can't beat it for being able to give you some very valuable performance information on an individual. So if you have any multiple people in the firm, or even just a single solo attorney, it's very important to understand what the productivity is for a given month. Now, what it doesn't show us is what I refer to as production line reporting. In other words, it doesn't show us what we worked this month, what happened to that time. It answers the question, what happened in the month of. So we're not focused on what happened to what I worked this month, but we are focused on what happened during this month. And that's a very important question for any firm to answer. You can put in the date gate period for a single month, or you can do it for a longer period of time. And then we can see some extremely valuable information. I mentioned before on the invoice report that we could see write-offs, and those write-offs we can see on this report as well. If there have been accounts receivable reductions, then we're going to see them in the write-off column. But notice that I also have an adjustments column. And as I mentioned, that's what happened during the billing process. So if those 6 hours were worked, and the 6 hours were billed at their actual value, rate times time, then the billable value is $3,000. The adjustment would be 0, or will be shown by a star. But in fact, if I had done a flat fee, a fixed fee, a markup, or a markdown as a discount at the time of billing, then the adjustment would show in that column. It's very, very important because we want to know what happened to that $3,000 worth of time. Bear in mind, however, that it may not have happened yet. If I ran this report in December because the time was worked in December, and I haven't actually done the billing yet, then the adjustment hasn't occurred yet, because PCLaw doesn't know what I'm going to do to that time yet. But it will know when I actually render or generate that bill in the month of January. So again, it's always understanding what question are we asking and what are we seeing on the screen. If you look at this report over a period of time, however, you're going to be able to see a good trend or pattern of what's happened for each one of the individual timekeepers. So when you look at the bottom totals and you say, okay, what was our total adjustment for maybe a year? What were our total write-offs for a year? What was the potentially billable time that was worked within the year? And then what did we actually bill that year? It's a very, very good report, just perhaps a little misunderstood. Well, supposing you're one of those people that says, you know, I'm really not fond of the font that I get to see in PCLaw in my reports. It's in Courier with the green and white bars. It's just not what I wanted to see. Well, please remember there's a lot that you can do as far as modifying reports in PCLaw. On the built-in reports, there's a plethora of lists of reports within that list. You have so many different choices of the individual reports, but you also have the ability in those reports to make modifications. Filtered modifications, presentation modifications. So if you think about all those variables, there's a lot more reports than even you can see on the listing. On the built-in reports, there's two very special areas that need to take, you need to have an exploration time with. At first, they look a little complicated, but they're well worth the exploration and spending some time to understand how they work. The first one is in being able to change the layout. Not all of the reports have this feature, but a lot of them do. So notice that on our receivables by client, we have the ability to use the default template, which is the one that we've all known and we saw earlier, that that's the standard version, but we can change that layout by clicking on the Change button. Notice that there's also the ability to do an advanced search. We have searching capability on the report. I could put in a search by a particular client if I wanted to. I could put in the search by a particular matter if I wanted to, or by a responsible lawyer. And a few more selections that we saw earlier by the aging date, etc. on the other tab. However, I have a lot more searching capability under that advanced search. I can go in and add a lot of criteria to narrow the number of records that I'm going to see. Or I can change the presentation under that change on the layout button. Well, let's look at that layout. And yes, I will admit it's a busy screen. And I would apologize, except in order to change the layout, we really have to do a little bit of programming. And it's quite well camouflaged from us. We have to know fields and field names, and we have to be able to move them around. But we do have to change the way the report is looking at data. So what we're seeing is the default report, and the first thing that we would want to do is change the name so that we're able to save it as a new report. We're not allowed to change the default report and save the default report in PCLaw, which is a very good thing. The programmers have protected us from ourselves, because if we went in and made a terrible mess of the report, then we wouldn't have an accounts receivable, and that would be a very bad day. But if we're able to only save it as a new report, it really doesn't matter what we do to it. We're not affecting anything or any of the functionality in PCLaw. So don't be afraid to go in and explore. What happens is we're seeing on the top part the results of where the fields are positioned and what the headers are actually telling us. We can go in and highlight a particular field, delete it, and remove it from our report if the report is too busy and we don't want to see that much detail on it. We can also add, because we can select the fields on the left, and then we can put them in on the right. The tricky part is getting them all to line up correctly. What we're seeing in the first column is the row. So we're going to see the first, the second, or the third row of where the information is going to appear. And then we're also seeing the position, whether it starts at 3.95 and ends at 7.85. It's telling us the width of the field and how much it can actually show. So although it's not the easiest thing to master at the beginning, it's well worth the effort. And I promise you, it can't hurt anything in PCLaw, so no reason not to go in and give it a try, to take out some of the fields that you don't want, to change them around, or even to change the font. The bolding, the wrapping, the presentation is really very, very flexible. So if you don't want to see your reports in Courier New, then have some fun and go in to change your layout. Now that advanced search feature is extremely important because we are able to go in and change the way it's going to present that information, filter it down, show less information, focus in. Do we only want to see those clients on our accounts receivable that have a trust balance? Not a problem. You can select your trust balance and say greater than 0. I only want to see those clients that have a trust balance greater than 0 because I'd like to determine what amount of money I can transfer from my trust. Not a problem. Look at all the different filter fields you have and realize that it is Boolean logic, so you can have multiple lines of filter in order to really tightly define the records that are going to appear on the report. Best place to go long before we export out to Excel and filter from there. Now, for those of you that may be a little bit more advanced, it is nice to know that really each one of those reports that we're working with and each custom report that we create is located in your stat data folder. It really is in a text format that you can go in and edit. Programming knowledge is needed for this one because we are actually seeing the field names and in that format, and it's difficult to understand where the start and the end of the field is. But for those of you that are familiar with HTML coding or anything else, you'll find yourself quite at home and able to work with the template. Editing that template, changing it, and then saving it will then allow you to go back into the front end of the program and use it. Okay, well, for those of you who are using the full GL accounting system of PCLaw, congratulations, because you're really getting the best benefit for your money out of the program. It's a great GL, and it really does work very, very nicely. And you can have all of the information from start to finish in PCLaw. But sometimes people are a little bit disappointed in the financial statement formatting. And it's only because they don't understand what all the possibilities are. So I think it's a good idea to take a quick exploration and understand what you can do with them. You can most definitely present financial statements for an individual person. You can do side-by-side comparisons for departments. You can do it from departments for an individual attorney. You just get very imaginative, and you'll find a way to do that in PCLaw. And notice that this income statement is certainly not in Courier New, and it is an income statement that does presentation based on title. So we're looking at the total for the partners versus the associates, paralegals, legal assistants, inactive timekeepers, and then we're looking at the allocation toward the firm. So we're looking at a breakdown. It wouldn't matter whether that said partner, associate, paralegal, legal assistant, or if at the top we had the name of each one of the people, individual attorneys in our firm. Could be by area of practice. We just have to make sure that we have PCLaw set up correctly to gather that information for us, and then that we're using the filters correctly on our report. Nice consolidated financial statement, even though behind that financial statement there could be 150 GL accounts. It's in a roll-up format, so we're able to see it in a consolidated format and quickly see the information that we want to see. Notice this variety or this format is showing it by individual person. So we could see it by individual person. In a larger firm, we might want to see this just for our associates. So we might want a page for our associates versus our partners versus our legal assistants. Doesn't matter. The concept is the filter works any way you want it to work. And notice in this presentation that we're doing a grouping. So we're doing a grouping of revenue, and then we're looking at the direct expense costs for those individual associates, and then we're looking at an allocation because we're doing an allocation back of overhead to those individuals. So we can get back down to a distributable amount of income that we've made from each one of those people. Again, think about it from area of practice, type of case. Think about it from any way you would like to look at your financial information. So the concept is we can group, we can show detail, we can group and show detail on the very same report if we choose to. The financial statement formatting actually gives us some of the most flexible choices on reporting in PCLaw. Notice that we have two on the individual account. We have the ability to show on the chart of accounts on any one of our accounts. We can categorize that account. We can put it into a cost center. We can associate it with a department, and we can also make it a sub-account. These choices are the key for being able to make those financial statements come out very flexibly, with great flexibility. So in the example that I showed you, what I actually have is the individuals using a department. I have a cost center that's associated with a job title, and then I have a category that is used to summarize the accounts. So by using those different elements on the actual general ledger account, I'm able to produce very, very detailed financial statements that would rival any other accounting program on the market. In the report itself, that's where I'm picking up on the report layout that ability to do a filter. And then I get my end result of filtering exactly what I want, and the presentation is exactly the way I want it to see it. Okay, well, let's go out to PCLaw for a moment and see if we can understand a few other elements that you might want to take into account. And one is, again, a demonstration to get back to our point of, remember the question you're asking. I want to know what happened in the month of December. So if I'm looking at that lawyer with billing and collection summary, I'm asking the question, what happened in the month of December? And don't forget that I'm also looking at whether or not it includes hold. And notice on my register, on my time register, my total for that same period is showing 14 hours worth of working. In reality, on this lawyer with billing and collection summary, I'm only seeing the 6 hours. Why am I seeing a difference in that time frame? It's because I'm using the hold feature on certain entries. And that hold feature is saying only show the description, I'm not going to be billing that time, or I'm not going to be billing that time during that period. Okay, well, let's look then at what we have in the reporting area. There's another area, if you haven't explored it, you really have to. It's hidden a bit. It's under the Reports Productivity area and then down to Custom Reports. Custom Reports allow me to create a report of my choosing. If I don't see a report that's in PCLaw and it's not the one I want, I've got almost what I need, but I really want to generate my own report, then it might be time to step out into the Custom Report area. What I can do is add a new report and give it a title, anything that I would choose. And the first question that it's going to ask me is, how do I want to group my report? And I'm going to select, I'd like to see my report grouped first by client, and then I want to see it grouped by working attorney. So I'm going to select first the way I want it grouped. And I get to choose whether I want to see the full client name or do I want to see the client nickname. I want to see the client nickname, but I'd like to see the full lawyer name on my report. Then I have a report, I've got a header. So now what I need to do is add in the fields that I want to show in my report. And I can click on my Add button, and then I'm going to get a list of fields that I'd like to choose from. So if I'd like to have the total time that was worked in a particular period, then I could add in my total hours enter. And notice on the right-hand side, I'm automatically being questioned about what period do I want to use for the total time entered. Do I want to use the month to date, year to date? Do I want to select that at the time I'm generating the report? Big difference, and it's also going to make a difference on my results because I'm going to be prompted for this choice on every one of my columns. For right now, I'm going to say I'd like it to be on the reporting period and add in my field. I have one field on my report. I've chosen to have this come in by client by timekeeper. So I will have one column, and the column will be total time entered. If I want to add additional columns, then I can add those additional columns, and look at what I have to choose from. I have all the areas we've talked about. I've got the time worked. I've got the billings, so what were the actual billings? I've got the collections, write-offs, accounts receivable, work in progress. Yay! That means I'm free to be able to select from any of those and put them into this one single report. I can even do the quoted amount or the budget amount for those individual matters. I can include general retainers. I can include trust. So I've got a lot of freedom in what I want to choose. But maybe I want to even get a little bit more creative, and I want to enter a formula. I'd like to know the variance. I'd like to know the difference. Or I'd like to know a percentage. Because maybe I have an arrangement with one of my contract attorneys that I'm going to actually pay that contractor 15% of the total dollars collected during the month. So I've got those fields, so I know that I have my collection amount. I know that I can see the collected fees for a particular attorney, and with my formula, I could put in a fixed amount of 15%, 20%, 40% of those collected dollars, and I would have my own built-in report from PCLaw to calculate that. Pretty awesome. When I've selected all the fields that I choose, and being very careful to read what the field is actually telling me, whether it's fees or net fees makes a difference, because the net fees would be after adjustments. What were we actually able to bill? And if I wanted to see the difference between the potentially billable and the adjustment to understand why we billed a certain amount, I might want to include more fields on there. I can even include my flat fee. So once I've selected my fields on the right-hand side, and I can be very creative, then I'm going to move to the next screen, and I'm going to choose how I want to summarize. The report in and of itself will be a summary report, but if I'd like it to basically recalculate from a different perspective, then I might want to include an additional summary on it. My report is going to include summary by client, and my report is going to include summary by lawyer, because I want to do it by client by lawyer. But pay close attention to what your choices are when you generate a custom report. Then you click on Finish, and now it is a part of my menu for custom reporting. As a reminder, if I want to go back later to find it, I'm going to look under Reports, Productivity, Custom Reports to find that report. Once I've located it, then I'm going to click on Run in order to run it. I'm still going to have some filters that are available for me. I'm going to be able to put in my starting and my ending date, and that's great because when I selected my fields, I chose to allow it to the dates to be selected at the time of generation of the report. I could have pre-coded it to do month to date, year to date within the report itself, and then I wouldn't have the same filter choices. I would just have the ones below, which are currently grayed out. It would ask me what's the start of the year you want to report, and what is the start of the month. But in my case, I'm going to go from the beginning of time in my sample database. I can jump over to the advanced screen, and I could filter further if I wanted to. So if I only wanted to see those matters that were assigned to a particular responsible lawyer, I could do that. If I wanted to exclude my archived and my inactive, most definitely I could do that. And there are other choices, including type of law as well. A lot of flexibility in one simple screen, not to be overlooked. Then when I generate the report, my one caution is that it does take longer to generate a custom report than it does a built-in PCLaw report. Be patient. It could take a significantly longer period of time. It's running through a lot of data, and in my example, I actually selected from the beginning of time. So I'm really making it work. And I'm making it work and looking at two different areas. I wanted it to look at the time area as well as the billings area. So it's generating from different tables. The reports that are built into PCLaw have been optimized by the programmers, so even though they're pulling a lot of data, there's special code in there to make them run very, very fast. Obviously, when I made my custom report, I didn't put any special code in, so it's going to take longer. However, it's a great report, and it's giving me the information exactly the way I wanted to see it by individual matter and then by the full name of that lawyer that worked on that particular matter. And it's showing me my date game. This report, and most all of the reports that are in PCLaw, can be sent out to Excel. These custom reports are designed very nicely for Excel. So if I go over to save my report, then I can change the format and select my Excel format or even a Microsoft Access format or an older version of Excel in order to send it out. If I wanted to modify the look of it, change my fonts, update some of the columns, then I'm free to do that and do some great presentation outside of PCLaw. But the information that I put on it is entirely up to me. So I just have to be creative in thinking about what I want to see and how I want to see it, and then I will get the results that I want. So as a reminder, just remember that PCLaw is going to answer the question that the report was designed to answer, or the question that you designed the report to answer. And if I'm asking the same question of two different reports, I will get the same answer in PCLaw. If I don't get the same answer, I'll put call to tech support and we'll figure that out. Otherwise, it's probably the question that I'm asking, and I think I'm asking the same question, but I'm really not. Have fun in those reports in PCLaw. You're only limited by your imagination. You're only limited by what the focus that you want to have on the information that you want out of the product. Play, experiment. You can't hurt it. You certainly can't do anything wrong with the code. Remember, the programmers have protected you. So all you can do is not, the worst thing you can do is not take advantage of the tool that you've been given. I know we're getting close on time, and I do want to open it up for questions. So Liz, if there are questions, if you would send them on, that would be great.
Okay, and actually we do have several questions. Nancy, could you put up your contact information as well?
I would be happy to do so.
And that way, if we run out of time, you can email Nancy or myself, and we will get you an answer to your questions. So the first question is, could you show one more time how you brought up custom reports?
Yes. And what we did on custom reports is we went to the reports menu on the top, and then we went to productivity, and then we went to custom reports from there. And then you're able to go into that custom report menu. And remember that we do have the slideshow that I went through earlier that will be available to you, so it'll give you a freeze capture of how I generated that report, as well as the video, so that you'll have something side by side to refer to when you work with it at home.
Exactly. Another question. When you run a report by lawyer name, does it include all the rates?
You can include the rates when you're generating that custom report. There is a rate area or a rate field. I'm pretty sure that there is. So if you wanted to see the rate times time in order to see the calculation, you could include that in your calculation if you wanted to, or you can just include the rate. But remember, if I wanted to back into it, I could do a calculation also. So if I wanted to know essentially what the effective rate was, and that would come into play if there was a discount or flat fee involved, I could put in the billed value and divide it by the time spent, and then I would get my calculated rate, which would be my effective rate. What did I really earn per hour, not what was my default hourly rate.
Okay, and we also actually have a clarifying question. What is a collecting lawyer? The AR reports menu window asks for a responsible attorney, but the report itself has a column entitled Collecting Lawyer.
There's a collecting lawyer, there's a responsible lawyer, there's the responsible or the introducing lawyer, client introducing lawyer. There's a lot of them. It really depends on the way you're defined as far as how I can answer that question. In most cases, the collecting lawyer is the same as the responsible lawyer. So it wouldn't be the individual fee credit lawyer, but it would be the responsible lawyer.
Okay. We actually have a lot of questions. We will not get to all of these. Is there a way to customize invoices, namely to show the attorney or paralegal rate rather than effective rate?
To customize invoices? Yes, absolutely. Your invoices really are just as flexible as the financial statements. I chose to show financial statements today just because I think that's a very underutilized area of the program. But on your invoices, you can show effective rate. You can show effective rate in the summary at the bottom of the invoice, or you can show the actual rate. And for those of you that are doing fixed fee, it's very important to differentiate between the two. Sometimes you want to show the actual rate even though the rate times time does not come up to the value. And other times we want to show the effective rate. That token is available for you, absolutely.
Okay, next question. Some reports show information on invoices generated during the report time period, while others show information for invoices generated previously but collected during the report time period. How do we know which report shows which information?
Really, in many cases, the report itself doesn't define what the focus period is, but virtually all the reports in PCLaw are working the way that I explained it. So it's looking at the date and interpreting it as the month of collection or as the month of billing or as the month of working. That's the way it's interpreting it. If you print separate reports, so if I print a time listing and I use the date worked, then I print an invoice listing, I can focus on the date billed, and if I print a collection report, I will see the date collected. But if I wanted to see what happened to the time that I worked in the month of December of 2012, what happened to it? Is it still there or has it been billed? And that's what I would refer to as an assembly line question about the time. And it's a little bit more challenging to get that out of PCLaw. It's possible, but it's more challenging. We do have, and I've moved over to the screen on our custom reports for PCLaw, we do have some custom reports and some dashboards that we've created for the application. I'm not going to take a lot of time to show those for you to you. There are available more information on our website, but I'm just going to show one of the dashboards that we've created, which is more interactive in nature. And it does help you change kind of your focus of being able to move from one area to another as you're actually evaluating the data. We do have available as well an assembly line report that would say what happened to the time that started that we worked in the month of December, now what has happened to it later.
Okay. And thank you for putting your contact information back up. We do have more questions, but we don't have more time. Once again, if you have questions, please feel free to email them to Nancy or myself. I will be sending a follow-up email next week with a link to the recording of today's webinar, as well as the slides from Nancy's presentation. There is a brief survey at the end of the webinar today that we ask that you take a moment to complete. We'll plan our future webinars based on your feedback. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, Liz, and thank you, LexisNexis, for letting us do these Feature Fridays so that all the customers can understand what a great product we have.